Chapter 6 The celestial compass. The silence in the command center was profound, a vacuum filled only by the ghostly light of the spinning star chart. It was a silence heavy with the weight of millennia, the hush of a tomb for a civilization that had conquered the heavens. Kaelin and Elara stood transfixed, two flickering flames of life in a vast, cold mausoleum of forgotten gods. Elara was the first to break the spell, taking a hesitant step forward, her silver bracer catching the phantom light. Her face, usually a mask of composed scholarship, was alive with an expression Kaelin had never seen before, a raw, unbridled wonder that bordered on religious reverence. "The Sky Sailors," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "The WYRM Riders of the Void. They were legends, Kaelin. Bedtime stories told to elven children, myths of gods who painted the night sky with their journeys. We thought them fanciful metaphors for the changing of the seasons." She reached out, her slender fingers passing through the shimmering image of a distant nebula, a cloud of soft pink and violet light that did not stir at her touch. But they were real. It was all real. Kaelin remained by the archway, his hand resting on the alien grip of the Sunreaver. Where Elara saw history, he saw power. An impossible, terrifying power that dwarfed the petty squabbles of kings and necromancers. The Holy Kingdom of Light and the necromancers of the Abyss fought over scraps of land, over ideologies and interpretations of divine will, while the builders of this place had treated stars as mere stepping stones. The rusted broadsword on his hip felt less like a weapon and more like a child's toy. "Be careful, Elara," he cautioned, his voice a low rumble that seemed too crude for this sanctum. "This history is defended by guardians that could level a city. Wonder is a luxury we can't afford if it makes us careless." "Careless?" She turned to him, her gray eyes shining with reflected starlight. "This isn't carelessness, Kaelin, it's discovery. This is the answer to a question no one in Illyria even knew how to ask." She gestured expansively at the room, at the two immense thrones that overlooked the celestial ballet. "This bridge, these thrones, they didn't command armies of men. They commanded the cosmos." She moved away from the central hologram, her immaculate silver and blue robes sweeping silently across the seamless floor. She ran a hand over the cool, dark surface of one of the sloping consoles flanking the two immense chairs. The surface was a slab of perfect black, featureless and inert. There are no scrolls, no levers, no arcane circles. How did they control it all? How did they make their intent known to the very firmament? Driven by a scholar's instinct, she placed her diagnostic spoon, the strange, crystalline tool from the medbay, against the console. Nothing happened. Frustrated, she sighed, a small puff of condensation in the cool air. Then her eyes narrowed in concentration. Perhaps it required a more direct approach. A more fundamental one. She rested her palm flat against the dark tablet, and pushed a gentle stream of pure, untainted mana into it, the same way a mage might prime an unlit crystal to accept a spell. For a moment, there was no response. Then, a single, glowing symbol flickered to life beneath her hand. It was an angular, geometric character, unlike any rune in elven, human, or dwarven script. It pulsed with a soft cyan light before fading back into darkness. "It responded," she gasped, pulling her hand back as if burned. "It's dormant, not dead. It thirsts for a source of power, for a will to guide it." While Elara became engrossed in the mystery of the console, Kaelin began a more practical search of the room. He was a knight, a man of action and tangible things. He trusted steel, stone, and the heft of a weapon in his hand. These silent, thinking surfaces made him uneasy. He circled the two command thrones, running his gauntlet fingers along their imposing frames. They were carved from some single, unknown black material, more like obsidian monoliths than furniture. Behind the right-hand throne, his fingers caught on a subtle indentation, a hairline seam that broke the otherwise perfect surface. A hidden compartment. He pressed, pushed, and tried to find purchase with a dagger's point, but it was sealed tight, a riddle of mechanics beyond a simple lockpick. Giving up for the moment, he returned to the center of the room, his gaze drawn back to the celestial map. If those consoles are the hands, he mused aloud, his voice echoing slightly, then this must be the mind. He pointed to the circular platform from which the hologram sprang. The control is here. Elara left the inert console and joined him, her scholarly focus now directed at the platform. Its rim was inscribed with dozens of the same strange, alien runes, each set within its own shallow indentation. Her eyes darted back and forth between the runes on the platform and the glowing symbols that marked major stars and constellations within the holographic display. Of course, she breathed, a slow smile spreading across her face as understanding dawned. It's an index. A compass rose for the entire universe. Each rune on this platform corresponds to a destination in the light sculpture. If one were to channel magic into a specific rune, you might show us the path to the Griffin's Claw Nebula, or you might summon another juggernaut to greet us. Kalen finished grimly. We don't know the language, Elara. We're children playing with a master wizard's staff. Then we must learn, she countered, her curiosity overriding his caution. We must experiment. Gently. Her eyes scanned the array of runes, finally settling on one that corresponded to a brilliantly lit star system far from their own, a cluster of 7 bright points of light. This one. It seems prominent. Important. Elara, wait. But it was too late. She had already placed her palm over the designated rune, her face a mask of concentration as she fed a delicate thread of her own arcane energy into the stone. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. The holographic stars blurred into streaks of light as the map zoomed in with dizzying velocity, focusing on the 7-star clusters she had selected. The entire room brightened, the ambient light shifting from a neutral white to a pale, clinical gold. But another sound accompanied the visual change, a low, rising hum that vibrated from within the walls themselves, a sound that resonated deep in Kalen's bones. Before he could even voice a warning, thin, ruby-red lines of light shot from hidden emitters in the walls and ceiling. They crisscrossed the chamber in a complex, terrifying lattice, forming a deadly web of pure energy that sizzled in the air. One beam grazed the back of the metal throne Kalen had just inspected. There was a faint hiss, and the top half of the throne simply slid off, crashing to the floor with a deafening clang, its edge cauterized to a molten orange glow. They were trapped. The laser grid had boxed them in, leaving only a small, circular safe zone around the central platform. By the Founder's folly! Elara cried, snatching her hand away from the rune as if it were white-hot. I am so sorry. Panic laced her voice, stripping away her scholarly composure. I thought it was just a map. Later, Kalen snapped, his mind already discarding fear in favor of tactics. He raised the orb of true sight. Through its crystalline lens, the room was a storm of raw energy. The laser grid burned a fierce, angry green, but he also saw new patterns. Faint conduits of power now flowed from the central platform to the very console Elara had first tried to activate. And on that console, the same single cyan rune was now glowing brightly, steadily. It's not just a trap, he said, lowering the orb, his voice steady. It's a security protocol. A challenge and response. We've presented a destination, and now it's asking for confirmation. On that console. But we can't reach it. Elara gestured desperately at the shimmering cage of red light that separated them from their goal. Those beams, they'd slice us to ribbons. Kalen's jaw tightened as he weighed their options. They were pitifully few. Then his eyes fell on the silver bracer adorning Elara's left wrist. It had saved her from the Juggernaut's crushing blow. A shield against physical force. But against this? Pure energy? The bracer, he said, his voice low but urgent. The shield it projects. Can it block those beams? Elara looked down at the artifact, her expression a mixture of hope and terror. It is a ward against kinetic impact. A shield of pure force. These are spears of coherent light. I don't know. The strain could shatter it. Or me. It's the only chance we have. She met his gaze, and in her wide, frightened eyes he saw her fear being conquered by resolve. She nodded, her lips a thin, determined line. Stand back. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Elara raised her arm. She murmured a single elven word Aegis, and the bracer flared. A shimmering, semi-transparent field of interlocking blue hexagons materialized around her, warping the air like a heat haze. The low hum of the shield was a counterpoint to the more sinister thrum of the laser grid dot. Don't stop, Kalen urged, his hand gripping the Sunreaver so tightly his knuckles were white. Just get to the console. Touch the rune. She stepped out of the safe zone. The moment her shield touched the first red beam, the effect was violent. A deafening VZZZZZZT sound filled the air as the light beams struck the blue force field. The shield flared with blinding intensity at the point of impact, and Elara cried out, stumbling as the raw energy pushed against her. The drain was visible, sweat beaded on her brow, and the blue light of the shield flickered ominously. But it held. Gritting her teeth, she pushed forward, one agonizing step at a time. Another beam connected with her shield, and another. Soon she was walking through a crucible of energy, her small form encased in a flickering bubble of blue light that was being battered by a storm of red lances. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her magical reserves draining at an alarming rate to sustain the artifact's function. Kalen could only watch, helpless. His Sunreaver was useless. This was a battle of ancient magic and unfathomable science, a duel of wills she had to win alone. Finally, her outstretched hand, trembling with effort, touched the console. She slammed her palm down onto the glowing cyan rune. Instantly, the laser grid vanished. The emitters in the walls went dark, and the oppressive hum ceased. The holographic map in the center of the room zoomed back out to its sweeping, galactic view. The silence that rushed back in was a physical relief. Elara collapsed against the console, her shield dissolving into nothingness. She was pale and breathing heavily, completely spent. Kalen was at her side in an instant, his gauntlet resting on her shoulder. Are you all right? Fine, she wheezed, pushing a stray strand of silver hair from her face. Just dreadfully out of breath. And my robes are probably singed. As she spoke, a soft click echoed from the direction of the command thrones. The hidden compartment Kalen had found was now ajar. After Elara had a moment to recover her strength, they went to investigate. Inside the small recess lay two artifacts on a bed of dark, velvety material that seemed to drink the light. The first was a smooth, white cylinder, about the length of a dagger's hilt, with a single, flush-set button on its side. Kalen picked it up. It was cool and felt strangely organic, like polished bone. He hesitated, then pressed the button. A soft blue light emanated from the tip, and a low, almost subsonic hum filled the air. Elara, who was leaning against the throne, straightened up slightly. What is that? She asked. The exhaustion in her voice had lessened, the color returning to her cheeks. The fatigue, it feels as though it's being washed away by a cool stream. A restorative device. A healer's tool that required no potions or prayers. Kalen turned it off and tucked it into his belt, making a mental note of its immense potential. The second item was a thin, rectangular slate, the size of his palm, made of the same dark material as the consoles. Etched into its surface was a single, intricate symbol in gleaming silver. Elara took it from him, her eyes alight with understanding. A key, she murmured, her weariness forgotten. Not for a lock, but for a mind. For access. She walked purposefully to the main console, the one she had risked her life to touch. Near the now dark cyan rune, she found a shallow indentation that perfectly matched the shape of the slate. With a steady hand, she slid the key into the slot. The effect was profound. The console, once dark and silent, lit up entirely. Dozens of glowing runes and diagrams sprang to life across its surface. Simultaneously, the colossal green glass view screen at the far end of the chamber, which they had assumed was a window, shimmered and activated. It was not a window into the earth, it was a display. An immense screen that now mirrored the console's output, showing the grand star chart and streams of glowing, incomprehensible data flowing beside it like waterfalls of light. They had not just disarmed a trap. They had been granted access. They stood before the awakened machine, bathed in the light of 1,000 alien suns. A universe of secrets, of pathways and destinations, was laid bare before them, written in a language they could not read, powered by a science they could not comprehend. Alara looked from the star-strewn screen to the glowing console, her expression one of sublime determination. "Now," she whispered, her voice full of the promise of endless discovery. "The real work begins."